Oh my God, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. I think I figured out the problem. I hope I figured out the problem. We've been dealing with huh? Huh? We've been dealing with storms here in our humble abode. So as you guys can tell, we're not in our normal studio. We are not in our normal lighting. We don't have our normal Joe Burrow backdrop, but we are here. We welcome in Cody. We welcome in Eric. Tonight, we are talking about LSU's deep roster. Some of you guys had some really strong thoughts on the LSU defensive depth chart. So tonight, we're going to discuss that video. There was legit someone new to the channel that started going nuts because he disagreed with my LSU depth chart. And he was like, John Trey Kirkland doesn't play offense. He doesn't play defense. But look, that's the point of this channel. Maybe we should flip John Trey Kirkland to the other side of the ball. So look, I'm wearing my new LSU hoodie that a lovely user got me. In other words, my girlfriend's parents got me this. They have welcomed us into their home, and I'm very lucky to be here with you tonight. We've had a Mikey, Roger, Nick, Eric, as always, Cody. So, I want to start talking about the LSU offense. So tomorrow I will release my first LSU offensive depth chart. And to me, I've always found this to be so interesting. Whenever we discuss LSU depth charts, whenever we discuss this player, that player, obviously my opinion ultimately doesn't matter. It simply doesn't. The opinion comes down to Ed Orgeron, such as this morning. I had thought for sure Mike Jones wasn't going to be an inside linebacker. Ed Orgeron said Mike Jones will be an inside linebacker this year. So I want you to understand that now, and this is the case as well in basketball, we live in a positionless world, right? So if you're a running back, you not only can't just be a running back now, you also have to be a wide receiver. You also have to be a great pass protector. If you're not good at everything, you're not going to play. At wide receiver, you got to be able to play on the outside as well as in the slot. You got to be able to do it all. And if you're an offensive lineman, you can't just run block. You have to be able to pass block. And it's an added bonus if you could play all the positions on the offensive line. So positionless world is the world that we're living in. So whenever we discuss, well, this linebacker is going to start at this position, well, he might not necessarily be an inside linebacker. He might be an outside linebacker. But nowadays, if you're a linebacker, you better be able to also cover like a safety. If you're a defensive tackle, you have to not only be able to stop the run, you got to give us something in the pass. If you're a defensive end, you got to be able to not only get after the quarterback, but you also have to be able to hold the edge. The only position that is the position is quarterback, right? That is the only position where basically you are that position. It's not really positionless, but even then, we need quarterbacks nowadays that are not only able to throw the football, they have to be able to run, they have to be able to move around in the pocket. So basically, if you're an offensive or defensive evaluator, you have to wonder not only which players are necessarily the best players for your team, which players are also the most versatile players on your team. So my first comments for tonight's live stream is going to set the tone for the rest of it. Because I know some of you aren't able to catch it. Some of you are able to watch it down the road. I do obviously rather you watch it live, as Mikey and Roger, Nick and Haley and Cody and Eric and Brian and Corey and all these people are here watching tonight's live stream. But I want you to understand something that I find to be so fascinating about LSU football this year. I want you to think which players can do the most for your team. It's not necessarily who the best player is, who can do the most things well. And tomorrow, when I release my offensive depth chart, you not only have to wonder who are your best players, but when you look at the running back position, don't just look at a running back as, well, this guy gives us the most in the running game. You also have to look at it, well, which running back can also catch the football out of the backfield? So it's very important. Now, the reason why I say all of that is because Jake Peetz is trying to figure this out now. Because last year, a huge issue for the LSU football team was that they simply had guys that were only good at one thing. They weren't consistently good at a lot of different things. So it's hard. It's really, really hard. And that's the thing, Kane. We don't know. And last year, the LSU Tiger coaching staff did not do a great job of figuring out who those guys actually are, which is going to be interesting. Mikey says John Emery gives you the best receiver at running back. Maybe he does. I went back and watched some John Emery tape today. We say hi to Ahmad. And Emery does have the highest potential of he and Titus Price of being a receiver out of the backfield, but he also had some drops. He had one against Missouri that was huge. I just went through and watched the entire Missouri game again. So it's very fascinating. You know, I think let's go. Whoa, Michael with the super chat. I appreciate it. What position group is the most loaded, QB or wide receiver? Oh yeah, 281-330-8004. So really quickly here with Kane, Emery couldn't catch a cold last year. Yeah, he had some drops. What's up, Micah? Showing some love from Elkhart, Indiana. So we're almost at the $20 threshold where we could see Bug. But Michael, what position group is the most loaded? Let's go to your question. First, is it QB or wide receiver? Well, the answer is pretty simple. That's going to be wide receiver. This group is deeper. It's deeper than the other groups in the past. The problem is that the top isn't as elite as that 2019 group. Because the 2019 group was interesting because the year before, LSU decided to bench 3 receivers who were really good for them in 2018. So what what Joe Brady decided to do was something really fascinating. He came in and Joe Brady quickly discovered something, that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Terrace Marshall were his 3 best wide receivers. So what makes that very interesting is that Joe Brady came from the NFL, right? And Michael, this is going to tie in with your question regarding the wide receiver position. So Joe Brady comes from the NFL, but what does the NFL normally do at the wide receiver position? Oh, yeah. They have a tight rotation. They rarely play more than 4 wide receivers during the course of a game. Whereas college teams are different. College teams have an endless amount of wide receivers. They get 2 or 3 elite receivers in every recruiting class. So they play more guys. Well, what Joe Brady said was when he came in, he said, look, we shouldn't do that. I know we have D. Anderson. I know Derek Dillon has been amazing for us. And I know Stephon Sullivan is really good. But what did he do? Well, he said, we need to tighten our rotation. And ultimately, that is what LSU did. And they had their most fruitful offensive season ever. And having a deep wide receiver room is really good, Michael. It is deeper than the quarterback room. I think the wide receiver room for LSU has more raw talent than the quarterback room. The only problem is that you only need four. You only need four. And if Ed Orgeron, who shared this morning that the LSU offense is going to be very similar to what they did in 2019, you basically only need three. So, yes, the wide receiver room is deep. And you can make a strong case this year for 10 different wide receivers to be a starter. The 5 true freshmen, obviously Keyshawn Butte, obviously Coy Moore, obviously Jeray Jenkins, Trey Palmer, and John Trey Kirkland, and even Alex Adams to an extent. So those are 11 guys fighting for 3 spots. 3 spots. So we will see how that plays out, Michael. I don't know who the 3 best wide receivers are. What's interesting is that Coy Moore was the only receiver last year for LSU that did not average double digits yard per reception. So he was your traditional Hunter Renfrow possession receiver. He's not really a deep threat. So if you're asking yourself, hey, which wide receivers would be the best group of talent for what we're going to do next year? Well, Trey Palmer, one thing he gives you, and he's not proven the ability to do this yet, but in theory, he is the fastest receiver on the team. He does give you back-breaking speed if he could put it together. So if Joe Brady's influence is really coming in on this offense, well, that means LSU is going to tighten their wide receiver rotation. That was John Trey Kirkland. That's why, Cody, at the end of the yesterday's stream, I say maybe John Trey's best position is defense. Maybe he is better at corner. We don't know. I don't know. So, let's see. Elkhart, Indiana. Micah, I hope the snow is not as bad for you as it is for us down here. It's kind of weird because in the South, we're just not used to it. Nick says my top 3 would be Keyshawn, BTJ, and Deion Smith. So of the true freshmen, Deion Smith probably has the best chance of cracking the lineup because he is the only enrollee out of the group. But, you know, when it comes to pure speed, I think just off the top of my head, Keyshawn and Trey are a step above everyone else. And Keyshawn's probably the fastest. I think if him and Trey raced, it would be close. And then after that, it would probably be Chris Hilton. If he's fully healthy, I think he's the fastest receiver out of this group that's coming in. Let's see. Jared says, Carter, I know we probably don't need any more linebackers, so we can use more linebackers. I like the room the way it is now. I'm a big believer in Mike Jones. And, you know, obviously we can make the rap joke all we want. We've done it 1,000 times. I've shared this before as well. Mike has interacted on my Instagram page before. I love Mike Jones. I really do think he could play. But man, you know, the linebacker in the portal that Jared is referencing is Ben Davis. He's a former 5-star. And ironically, Ben Davis played a few snaps in the 2019 LSU game at linebacker, and he missed a critical tackle on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but they still marked Clyde short. It was a horrible spot, and LSU decided to punt instead of go for it. I did a whole video on it, how crazy I thought Ed Orgeron was for not going for it there with Joe and Clyde. But, you know, it's interesting that I like what Ed Orgeron's done already at linebacker. And look, you know, next year you're going to be playing 2 linebackers most of the time. We know most of the offenses in the SEC are going to be passing offenses. So you really only need 2. And the one thing that's a myth is that linebacker rotates a lot. It really doesn't. LSU has always kept the same linebackers on the field. Really, the only year I could remember LSU had a pretty heavy rotation at linebacker was when they had Jacob Cutrera, Kelvin Shepard, and Perry Riley all on the same team. That was a nasty linebacker core. And they would rotate that position a little more often then. But obviously, if you have that kind of talent, all those guys deserve to play. But, you go back to 2019, it was the Patrick Queen and Jacob Phillips show. And the year before that, it was the Jacob Phillips and Devin White show. And then before that, it was whoever's on the field with Devin White. So we'll see. But Jared, Ben Davis, I don't think LSU is going to pursue him. But he was a 5-star recruit. He was the number 1 rated player in Nick Saban's class. And Jared, I think that was his 2016 class, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the 2016 LSU class. So hopefully that answers your question. Mikey says, I think our 3 will be Kayshawn, Trey, and Chris. That's a really nasty group. That's a really good group right there, Mikey. The hard thing here with Chris Hilton is, he and Deion Smith are very similar players. Deion's probably a little bit more of and this is just very limited novice film study. I'm going to be honest, I'm not the best wide receiver evaluator in the world. It's a position I've never played. When I was in high school, I played mostly defensive line, and in middle school, I played running back, defensive line. But I just know very little about wide receiver play. But I say this, and I say this kindly. I think Chris Hilton's going to be really good. I do. I've grown on Chris Hilton quite a bit, simply because the dude is just unreal speed, and he's really smooth. And ironically, I don't think he's done growing yet. I don't. I think he's got some frame that will be added once you get to LSU. But Chris is special. He's really special. Might not be a year 1 guy, though. Remember this. Most LSU wide receivers are not year 1 guys. Okay, I do want to check in on everyone, because sometimes it is just me talking, but I am concerned about everyone in this ice storm. Trey, by the way, thank you for your Venmo. And I want to go to some of Trey's comments really quickly. Love what Stingley said about the energy and attitude that Daronte is bringing in on defense. And Trey also continues, sounds like Peetz is getting a good eye on all the quarterbacks. So let's talk some, and Trey, thank you for the Venmo, by the way. Look, first thing, all 4 quarterbacks are getting the same amount of reps right now, which is a smart thing to do. Jake Peetz has never been around any of these guys before. So once again, this is his fresh perspective on the quarterback position. And honestly, he does have a decent sample size to look at what all those quarterbacks did last year. So what I decided to do today was rewatch some of the lesser games for LSU last year. For instance, the Florida game is a game that we all remember very clearly. It had a ricochet interception. It had all these crazy plays. But I wanted to look at some of the other plays from the other games.
Everything working okay?
One thing that I saw was very interesting was TJ Finley really did not play bad. He really did not play bad for a true freshman. In fact, he did a lot of things that true freshmen are not supposed to do as a quarterback that really showed some promise. Some stepping up in the pocket that was really impressive. Some allowing wide receivers to clear out their routes. I mean, he did a really good job in a lot of aspects. The only thing, and it's hard to eliminate this, it's just the back-breaking turnovers. It was so bad. It was so bad. And when you do that, you just can't play if you make back-breaking turnovers. You look historically, teams that have pick sixes are going to win 90-something% of the time. So, that's the only thing. That's the risk you run with TJ Finley, whereas the other two simply just did not do that in the games that they played. And TJ did it a lot. So we'll see what happens. Trey's second comment was about Daronte talking about Stingley Sr.'s influence. Or excuse me, the other way around. Stingley talking about Daronte Jones's influence, and that's really good. Look, one thing is for certain, and I said this when Daronte Jones was hired, the player relationship thing was just a home run. He coached defensive back in the NFL. He coached past LSU players. He coached, obviously, he was on the opposite side of the ball, but he coached Justin Jefferson, who's probably telling the players, hey, this guy's a really cool guy. So, all those things are true. But honestly, whoever was going to come in and be the defensive coordinator was going to be better in that aspect than Bo Pelini. What's going to be interesting for Daronte Jones's defense, and Andre Carter's going to play a heavy role into this. One thing that teams started to do versus LSU was they would take advantage of what LSU would do as far as defending edge runs. Basically, what LSU did with their defensive ends would do, and it's complicated to describe during the live stream, they would do something called a kill and spill. And some of you probably know what that is. But what a kill and spill means is that the defensive end cuts down on the pulling guard to the inside and tries to force the ball carrier to bounce to the outside. So not to get too detailed into what I saw watching LSU, but this happened against Missouri, this happened against Auburn, and this really happened against South Carolina, ironically. They would manipulate that. So what they would do is they would actually pull two people around. So when the defensive end would take out the first pulling guard, there would be another puller right there to seal the backer going to the outside to make the tackle. So basically, that technique, it wasn't the scheme, it was the technique. And I think that's some of the stuff Blake Baker was talking about. The technique was off as far as defending the run with the kill and spill technique. And I reached out to a few college defensive coordinators that I know in the industry, and they say that the kill and spill is kind of dead. So a lot of teams don't do it anymore because of that, because there's different ways you can manipulate that. I know that was a lot of football minutia and all of that, and I'll do film studies coming up to explain that in further detail. But that's something else Daronte Jones is going to have to do. It's not just 4-3 versus 3-4, and it's not just figuring out the personnel. One hidden thing that's not talked about a lot in football is what are the techniques? What are the techniques the individual players do? And not only the techniques the individual players do, but what are the techniques that individual players do that have an effect on each other? So obviously, when it comes to corner, the way Elias Ricks defends a wide receiver is different than how Derek Stingley defends a wide receiver. They're both really good at doing different things. But there needs to be more consistency defending the run and the pass technique-wise. It's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. Let's see. So hopefully that answers your questions, Trey. Quinn, welcome to the live chat. Quinn, everyone welcome Quinn. I think, Quinn, this is your first one. Thank you for swinging by the channel. Feel free to chime in with anything you want. Mikey, you got 3 inches of thick snow. Hope you guys are staying safe. Once again, we are at our girlfriend's parents' house. And guess what? We got an extra special booger guest tonight. Jamal, what's up, man? What's up, Justin? Esteban, I'm sure they'll feel, let's see. Mikey says there's really no such thing as a 4-3 or 3-4 when nickel is your base package now. That's kind of true, Mikey, but it's also a little more complicated. Roger literally lost power a minute into the stream. And Roger is in Mount Holly, Arkansas. Okay. So I do want to make this known. And I do want to share this. I was going to save this some other time. And I'm not just saying this because Roger sent in a super chat. So Roger reached out to me on Twitter and sent me a message and said he's an early Doucette fan. So, Roger, I actually got you a really cool early Doucette card. It's coming in the mail. And, Roger, I'm going to send it to you once it gets in because Roger has been supporting the channel, sharing it with his friends. So, I know we were supposed to give out a card at 4,000 subscribers, but Roger said he was a big early Doucette fan. And I got him a super cool early Doucette card coming in the mail. So, congrats to you, Roger. And thank you for your super chat, man. I appreciate your support. Let's see. Let's get to a few of your questions. So let me share what I saw today about what's up, Brian? Let me share what I thought 3-4 versus 4-3. We're talking about Chris Hilton, by the way. He is very much like early Doucette. They're very similar players. Mark says, I think Ed Ingram will take the next step this year. Look, you put Ed Ingram on versus South Carolina, and you see an NFL left guard. You think you're watching Trey Turner. I mean, he was special in that game versus South Carolina. The only problem with Ed Ingram is consistency. And you kind of sometimes you just take for granted guys like Devin White and Patrick Peterson, guys that week in and week out. Joe Burrow obviously were just dominant. Just every week they just didn't have off games. That is so hard to do as a college player when you're going to class and all those things. Ed Ingram's health, first thing, needs to work itself out. He got hurt in the Missouri game. They played Charles Turner a lot at left guard, and Turner, he's still there. Decent player. Maybe he can crack the lineup next year. So Ed Ingram's health, that is something you have to remember about this offensive line, is that they were very unhealthy last year. Dare Rosenthal got hurt. Ed Ingram got hurt. Jason Hines had his moments. Austin Deculus banged up. It is so hard. It is so hard to stay healthy. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, early Doucette was a crossing pattern killer. Ryan, what's good, man? It is really cold. Jermaine, that's an interesting question. It's a loaded question. Do we think we need a new offensive line coach? No, I'm going to roll with James Craig for another season, but I will share this. And look, I get a lot of blowback when I've shared this. It's not the first time I've shared what I'm about to say, but the 2019 LSU offensive line, they were the Joe Moore Award winners. And anytime an LSU athlete wins an award, I think they deserve it because I'm an LSU fan. The more awards, the better. But a lot of you feel the same way I feel about Grant Delpit winning the Thorpe Award, right? He deserved it his sophomore year, but his junior year, he did not deserve it. He was the fourth best defensive back on his own team. But I am happy he won the award. The same thing is true for the 2019 LSU offensive line. They were not the best offensive line in college football in 2019. They were really good. But if you actually sit down and watch it, and it requires you to actually sit down and watch the offensive line, in 2019, they missed a lot of assignments. Now, in their defense, they switched from the 2018 grounded pound, where they led the SEC in rushing attempts per game at 43, And the very next season, LSU only averaged 32 rushing attempts per game. So their entire offensive line shifted to being a pass blocking offensive line. And the Joe Brady offense does open yourself up to exotic blitz patterns. The Joe Brady offense runs a lot of empty formation, which in other words means you send the running back out in motion so you can see what the defense is going to run, if they're going to be in man coverage or not. But when you do that, it opens yourself up to a lot of different blitzes. So, when you run this offense, your quarterback is going to be susceptible to getting hit. With that said, the 2019 unit got Joe Burrow hit a lot. But Joe Burrow was so freaking good, he could release the football before he would actually get hit. So a good example of this, go back to the 2019, and I charted this full game. LSU was up by 13, and it was the third quarter, and it was 3rd and 5. The biggest myth from that LSU-Alabama game was that the game was close. It was not close. Alabama got a few lucky stops when LSU got into plus territory versus Alabama. The only reason why LSU did not score on those third quarter drives was that LSU had horrible protection breakdowns. There was a 3rd and 5 where Jamar Chase was wide open on a corner route. Ed Ingram was inserted into the game at left guard, and he missed a block on Christian Barmore, who was Alabama's best defensive line on this 2020 team. And because he missed the block, Barmore hit Joe Burrow right when he was throwing the football to Jamar Chase, and it caused the ball to sail. If you block Jamar there, guess what? You win the game. You win the game because the ball is completed, we're in field goal range, it ends the game. But if you actually go back and watch the 2019 game in full, Joe Burrow got hit a lot on a lot of the big throws. And Clyde was so great at catching hot routes out of the backfield, but it wasn't just the Alabama game. It was the Clemson game as well. Joe Burrow's mobility will be the most undertold story about the LSU 2019 team, because what happens is that we live in a highlight society. So when you show highlights of Joe Burrow, what people see are the throws to Jamar Chase and the throws to Justin Jefferson, and they see those plays, they see the touchdowns, and you don't think of Joe Burrow as a runner. When you think of, Johnny Manziel, you think of he was a runner who made all these crazy plays. When you think of Lamar Jackson, you think of a runner. You don't think of Joe Burrow as a runner. But Joe Burrow was a runner. He was one of the most effective runners and pocket mobility guys. You never just sacked him for a huge loss. Robert! Oh my goodness. Robert with the 50 burger. Let's go. Thank you, Robert. So Robert, he has shared his story on here before. His family got hit hard by this pandemic, and Roger is feeling better. Me and him have emailed back and forth. Thank you so much, Robert. So, Robert, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. I get emotional when I get a 50 burger because it's so cool. Thank you, man. I appreciate you. Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Exactly, Esteban. Joe Burrow's runs versus Georgia were so filthy. It was so filthy. It was so filthy. But look, that's what made him so great. So, look, bottom line, that 2019 unit gave up a lot of pressures. They were amongst the SEC leaders in pressures. So we look at the 2020 unit, and I thought for a second that getting 4 new guys in could potentially make the 2019 unit better. Now, this isn't a live chat to just trash the 2019 unit. They were mostly good. But if you were to ask me to compare the 2019 LSU team and the 2020 Bama team, the biggest gap in position groups would be Alabama's 2020 offensive line, which is probably the best offensive line I've ever seen in the SEC, versus a 2019 LSU offensive line, which was a really good offensive line. But, outside of running back, LSU had a huge advantage at quarterback when you compare the two, and LSU had a huge advantage at wide receiver, even though Alabama had the Heisman Trophy winner at wide receiver. So I say that because it's not an insult to the 2019 LSU offensive line for me to say that they weren't as great. That's more of a testament to how great Joe Burrow was. It was unreal. It's truly unreal if you actually sit down and rewatch every play. And then fueled by haters, and someone else mentioned this a minute ago, don't forget about the 2018 Bama where he had crazy runs, and the 7 overtime game against Texas A&M where he had what? He had like 30 rushes. Maybe one of you guys could pull it up. I think Joe Burrow had like 30 runs versus 2018 Texas A&M. Joshua, let's see. Yeah, I got your email, Joshua. I haven't had a chance to respond to, all the emails I'm able to get, but I will get back to you.
I just want to forewarn you, the power may go out. Everybody in El Dorado is losing power.
Okay, right, so I want you guys to know we might lose power in just a second because of the power grid. So if it happens, number one, thank goodness I was able to finally connect. We had audio issues. It is snowing. It is snowing hard where I currently am. That's a good question. I was thinking about Alex Adams. He did catch one pass. You go back and you look at Alex Adams' high school. He played at a lower level in Mississippi, so he didn't really have great competition. But, notice going into last year, we weren't talking about Jeray Jenkins at all. Now, if you were to put odds on who your starting wide receivers would be, I think Jeray Jenkins has the highest odds to be the number 2 guy.
Babe, I need to plug your cell phone
in. You need to give me some juice?
Yeah.
We're in panic?
Yep.
Well,
your mother's lost power, Jane's lost power, Martha's lost power, Kelly lost,
everybody's losing power.
Yeah.
But the gods say we need LSU football
okay?
talk.
I'm airplane moding it, okay?
You're airplane mode?
Yeah.
Mine?
Yes.
Dang. Quinn, I'm not hating on the SIP, baby. Don't think he played at a lower level in Mississippi. I'm not hating on the SIP. There's a lot of good players that come out of the SIP. Stephen Ridley from Natchez. Let's go. Let's go, Quinn. Actually, I take that back. Alex Adams played at the highest level in Mississippi because I love Mississippi. Mississippi gets a bad rap. Mississippi has some of the most diehard LSU fans. Dead serious. If you go into Natchez, you're going to see as much LSU gear as you see Ole Miss gear. I promise you. I promise you. Wayland says, do you think Palmer will have a breakout season? Man, I hope. I really hope. Number one, we got to have him as a kickoff returner. He's probably LSU's best kick returner since, I don't know, obviously Trendon and Odell, and those guys are really good. Fueled by haters. Okay, well, fueled by haters, I'm the Mississippi hater. But no, look, I was doing it. Okay. You guys ask me all the time to share stand-up stories. Funnest stand-up comedy show I've ever done was in a brewery in Natchez, Mississippi. Funnest show. And the clip is somewhere. We started a Joe Burrow chant, and I did the show in the middle of the 2019 season. And the Saints were doing good as well, obviously, in the 2019 season. So everybody in that crowd went nuts because I did a show. I did the show in a Saints hoodie. So yeah, I love Mississippi. Mississippi is low-key an LSU state and a Saints state. Cole Taylor has potential. Let's see. I sent money to Mr. Powers and the power came back on. Can you keep it on? Huh? Well, you know what's funny? I don't think it's interesting. My laptop has juice, so we might be able to continue. Robert, once again, I know Robert's one of those guys that just likes to sit back, but it is your $50 super chats, and we'll go to whatever you want to talk about. We haven't really got to LSU recruiting just yet. One quick recruiting note is that LSU's roster is not only very old, but it's also very young at the same time. Because look, there's so many seniors that decided to come back, but there's a lot of good youth on this team. Something that's going to be interesting about the 2022 recruiting class is that I think they've already landed the two most important pieces. Now, I've always said this. There's no such thing as a must-get recruit. One player doesn't make your class. However, I think Walker Howard is the real deal, and Will Campbell is an in-state offensive lineman. Any other time period, if this was 2014 or 2015, was when LSU was recruiting really well on the offensive line, Will Campbell wouldn't be as big of an impact. But because LSU's offensive line recruiting has not been great, that made the Will Campbell commitment all the more important. And then you're going to get some of the Louisiana guys. I mean, you already have Welch and a few of those guys. So one quick recruiting thought here, because I know a lot of you come here for recruiting at the end. The 2022 class, even if you don't land Walter Nolan and those guys, it's not as important because you did so well in not only the 2021 class, but the 2020 class has some good ball players. If let's say Marlon Martinez turns out to be good, well, we'll see. Achiki, what's good? Josh, I got your email, my guy. Let's see. And you got Dakotas Crawford, baby. Shreveport, stand up. North Louisiana, stand up. Let's go. Waylon says John Emery will be an All-American in this offense. So, Waylon, I'm not going to disagree with you with his potential. Okay, I don't think any one of us would disagree with John Emery's potential. The problem is if he's even going to win the job. The hardest hurdle for him is to be the guy that is going to be the undoubted number one running back. So what does that mean? Well, it's going to be hard to just win this job outright. Hokie, what's good? I love me some Stephen Ridley, man. God, I love me some Stephen Ridley. Kobe, what's good? So look, I really hope John Emery lives up to his 5-star status. The first thing, if you are a John Emery believer, is that 5-star Louisiana prospects never bust. They simply never bust. Only one since 2011, 5-star Louisiana prospect, did not pan out. And that was Tyron Johnson, who transferred and ended up in the NFL. Okay? So if you do believe being a 5-star Louisiana guy, well, guess what? That means Sage Ryan and Mason Smith have a high probability of being a very effective players. Now, some 5-star Louisiana guys didn't turn out to be 5-star producers. For instance, Anthony Freak Johnson ended up being an all-SEC performer his final year, but he never was dominant. Malachi Dupree was a 5-star Louisiana wide receiver. He never was dominant, but he did have back-to-back 40-catch seasons in a Les Miles offense, which is, in any other offense, a 60 to 70-catch season. So John Emery would be the first 5-star Louisiana guy who didn't have really good production. Now, as a true freshman, he was effective for LSU, but a lot of that was in garbage time. Last year, it was a weird year. Okay. John Emery was battling a lot of pandemic issues off the field with his family. In other words, his family got hit hard. So that has a mental effect on players playing a very physical game. With that said, we were told that the LASIK surgery was going to be the answer, uh, and he was going to take that next step. So let's discuss a few things about John Emery Jr. Number one, is he the best wide receiver out of the backfield for LSU? If you missed it, we started our live stream today talking about which running back isn't necessarily the best running back, which running back can do all the facets of the offense the best. So, in other words, some running backs are good in short yardage. Some running backs are just home run hitters. Some running backs are just good in pass protection. Some running backs are just special teamers. But if you're going to run the Joe Brady offense, you got to have a running back that can do it all. Because guess what? The Joe Brady offense for the Carolina Panthers, even though he was hurt, who is the running back for that offense? Well, it's Christian McCaffrey, a guy that could do everything. In 2018, it's the same thing, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Or 2019, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was that guy. So that's how it works. And then obviously when he was with the Saints, Alvin Kamara was that guy. So in order for this offense to work, in theory, you got to have a running back that could catch out of the backfield. John Emery has shown some promise in that area. So that's going to be huge. That's going to be absolutely huge. So we'll see. Waylon says Sage Ryan will start as a nickel third linebacker. I could see that happening, yeah. Robert, you're right. So everything depends on the offensive line. Can they make some holds and hold their blocks? And that's the big thing. So let's discuss the LSU offensive line. Because obviously Ty Davis-Price is going to get some carries. And, you know, what can we make of Kevontae Bradford? Nick says Corey Kiner. I like that. Corey's got some real talent. He really does. Eric's a Corey Kiner guy, too. So Robert wants to talk offensive line. All right, so let's do it. First thing. So I went back and, like I said, today I didn't want to produce any content. I just wanted to go back and watch some of the games. And I went through some of the offensive line film study, or I went through some of my past offensive line film study. And the unit was just so unbelievably inconsistent. Now, first thing, it's layered. It is really hard to play with three different quarterbacks, especially in a 10-game All-SEC season. But with that said, this is LSU. We don't average 3.3 yards per rush. That should never be the case. Never, ever, ever, ever. Now, look, some of that is due to LSU really committing to Chris Curry early in the year. And to me, Chris Curry, I think, is actually going to fit Utah's scheme really well. But that took carries away from two backs that were better than him in TDP and John Emery. Also, the offensive line really struggled at the point of attack. Sometimes it was assignment issues. Sometimes it was passing off blocks. Sometimes it was delayed blitzes. Sometimes the defense just had a really good run blitz called. So, and you know, for instance, if you run a delayed run out of the backfield and the defense randomly brings a corner blitz, that's going to shut that play down every time. That's just bad luck. There's nothing you can do as an offensive line. But there are other times where defensive tackles were just brutally beating up the middle of the line. So if you were to ask me which offensive lineman should move, or should there be an offensive lineman that should be benched? Well, before we discuss which offensive lineman should be benched, we need to discuss this. Is there an offensive lineman who played well enough to unseat one of the 5 offensive linemen from last year? So the left tackle, of course, let's say LSU returns their entire offensive line, which they do. So the left tackle is Dare Rosenthal, the left guard is Ed Ingram, the center is Liam Shanahan, the right guard is Jason Hines, and the right tackle is Austin Deculus. So if the left guard...
Before the power goes out?
What's that?
They're doing rolling blackout, so it may go out any second.
Okay, come on. Hurry up. We're going to end this thing in a second.
Well, no, you don't have to.
Cool. Everyone say hi. Come here. And then go get the other one.
Oh, the other one?
Yeah, the other one. Everyone say hi to Big. We got to...
Come here, Tartar.
Before the end of the... this is for Robert. Come on. I'm telling you guys, Booger hates the cold weather so much. But obviously, what are you doing? There you go. Come on. Look at that. Oh, my bud. So essentially, Robert, you're right. They struggled picking up blitzes. By the way, this is the first time me doing this. Hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already. So I want y'all to know something. We got an extra one here.
Hold on.
All right, let's do it. Switch. I wish Debbie was here tonight. Oh yeah, Debbie's in Texas. She's probably
bless her heart.
And this is, everyone say hi to Tartar. This is another dog. This is Bug's best friend, Tartar.
Hey, Eric.
There's Tartar.
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 She's the worst.
So, all right, let's do an honest vote. Bug or Tartar?
Oh, well, easy.
Type B for Bug. Type T for Tartar. Or is Tartar is Tartar said tonight?
Sister.
So, oh no, Saul says T for Tartar.
Bug not the only one.
Brett BTT. No new friends, Bug. Chase says Tartar.
Y'all better get on the right
Oh
side
my
of
goodness. I'm going to block you guys from the chat forever if you vote Tar. That's a number 18 and number 7. Robert says Bug. We knew Robert was going to do it.
She's going to bite me. She is mean.
She's mean. She's mean. She'll bite you too. Y'all want to see her bite? She's not going to bite now. Everyone say bye. They're going to bed early.
Oh, she's growling now. Come on, Tar, get out. Go on,
Oh, man. Saw change her vote. Oh, man. Escamon said, yep. Mike, what's good, man? Both Mikes, what's up? BNT. Uh-huh. Oh, man, that was so great. I got to check in on Debbie, dealing with the power outages. So they're doing rolling blackouts here, so we're going to lose power in just a second. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep going until then. So, Robert, I agree. The LSU offensive line really struggled picking up blitzes, and they struggled to communicate and pass off blocks. You want to see a good example of this? Go back and watch the 2011 LSU team. That was a really smart offensive line. And obviously, I had friends that played on that offensive line. But, the funny thing about that 2011 team is that La'el Collins was on the bench. And, you talk greatest LSU offensive lineman of all time. It's probably La'el, Andrew Whitworth, Saron Black's in that conversation. And then, of course, you go vintage. That's Alan Faneca, Kevin Mawai. But that offensive line was really good. And one thing that they were really good at is communicating. They always said that. Kobe, we'll see you, man. They were really good at communicating with each other. And that's so huge. So huge. And one thing that's kind of important is understanding the basics of offensive line play. So obviously you block inside out. What that means is you block guys that come through the A gap. The guards and centers need to take care of the A gaps, and then the B gaps, and then the C gaps. You would rather outside pressure than pressure right up the gut. That's a basic that LSU, obviously needs to work on. Let's go, Drip with the 13-0. Let's go. Let's go, Drip. Ahmad, you guys got to understand, Ahmad is always good for one trolling comment. I got to get a better nickname for you. Saw SYS. So if you go to my front page, you'll see my 2021 season prediction, my game by game season prediction. So we've already done that video. Saucy, let's go with that. So I said LSU should reach 10 wins next year. I'll gladly take 10-3 next year, and then the next year should be our real national championship year.
Oh my God.
What do you mean? What happened to Dummerville? Are you saying you think he should have played more last year? Is that your point of Cheeky? I'm interested. Carvis, what's good, man? Carvis says 11-1. So here's what's funny. College football can be tricky. It's not sometimes when you lose, it's who you lose to. So obviously 11-1, if you lose to Alabama, you're not going to the playoff. But if you go 11-1, and let's say that loss is to Ole Miss or that loss is to Florida, that gives you a better shot because those teams are more likely to lose another game, and Florida's in the East. Juan says 12-0 should be the standard every year. I like that. I like that mentality. Dave, that's interesting. Jefferson wears number 18. Would love to see Chase, Marshall, and those guys do it too. Well, yeah, I would like that. So obviously you can't wear number 18 for Indianapolis. And I can't think where else that number would be retired. I don't know if they retired it in Denver or not. But yeah, that's interesting. Had the tradition of wearing the number 18 uniform. The problem is that most receivers have the number 18 already locked up. Drip, that's so true. I'm just glad the Alliance Rex rumor is done. Someone in the comment section freaked out on my last video when I said he's going to start. I would be interested to see if LSU puts him at the nickel. I would be very interested to see him play slot corner simply because he's so freaking good at reading passing angles. Let's see. Coach O pulled off an undefeated season next year. He would be tied with Sweeney with titles. Yeah, I mean, if he goes undefeated next year, he's obviously on Dabo Sweeney's level. Corey, great question. Who do we use this last spot on? Great question. You know what I would do, Corey? I would leave that open and be very selective with who you get in that last spot. And what I mean by that, are you getting an offensive lineman or are you getting someone that's going to play now? It definitely needs to be someone that could play right the freak now. One name that's really sexy right now is this corner out of West Virginia who decided to hit the transfer portal because his defensive backs coach transferred over to Georgia. that would obviously be a player well worth getting in the portal. So, his name's not off the top of my head, but that would be a huge pickup if you can get a cornerback that could play at the SEC level, even if LSU recruits that position really well. And even if you're high on Dwight McGlothern, the one thing, and you could see this everywhere, obviously game-breaking wide receivers make a difference, and we tend to understand how great we were at that position in 2019, but there's always going to be guys out there that can catch the football. There are a limited amount of people that could defend the guys that the footballs really well. And the guy from West Virginia is one of those guys. Well, Drippy's already signed the paperwork. So I'm not going to make Drayshawn Miller. Okay. I'm not going to make this a Tristan Lee live stream because then you'll get me fired up. But why I agree with you. Be very picky. Robert says we should use it on the offensive line. So, yeah. But you saw last year, LSU was scrambling to get a corner. Okay. And you saw who they had to get. They had to go to Nichols and get the Darren Evans kid. And look, he shouldn't have even played last year. But he was forced into action against Mississippi State, which is a horrible matchup to actually play. That is playing against a Mike Leach offense is a bad draw for a corner playing in his first ever LSU game. But he had to play, and they tried playing him some against Florida, which is also a horrible matchup for him. That's why, for instance, what if Sting or Eli gets hurt? So if you can get another corner, that would be very nice. Or PJ says save it for the next season, and you could sign 26 guys. Vince, that's interesting. I did not know that. Thank you for that, Vince. I really didn't. And welcome, Vince, to the channel. Vince, is this your first live stream? Everyone welcome Vince. Everyone also welcome Saucy. He saw SYS, Saucy. Well, everyone welcome Vince and Saucy to the channel. There we go. Exactly, Esteban. No weight training, no Moffitt, no none of that. Brandon, that's a good point. I want to see more touchdowns scored in the red zone. I don't have LSU's red zone statistics in front of me, but the Missouri game is the game that I just studied, and something that interested me in that game was, and this is a problem Ed Orgeron has with managing games. We'll go to Robert really quickly. Really had a lot of hope for Cardell. Yeah, I watched the snaps that Cardell Thomas played this year versus South Carolina. That was the game he played. And look, it's garbage time. It's the end of the game. And he was on the field and Anthony Bradford were on the field. The one thing that I found very interesting watching them was that they looked very stiff. They didn't look fluid. Now, obviously, Cardell is still recovering from the injury, but one thing that is hard to evaluate when it comes to offensive linemen is how well do you move? how fluid are you athletically? And honestly, Cardell, and those are limited snaps, but he does look a little stiff. Now, that doesn't mean, he doesn't get it together and finally breaks through. But you got to, I mean, these defensive linemen are just so freaking athletic. I mean, Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle for Alabama, runs like a gazelle. I mean, uh, a lot of these DTs that are huge can really move now. Mason Smith is obviously one of those guys. Jaquelin Roy, very active players. So, you know, it's so different because when you're playing offensive and defensive line in high school, you get caught doing bad habits. Christian says third down defense had to be the worst in the NCAA going off eye stats. It wasn't good. And one thing LSU really struggled with, if you go, and this is something regarding the four-man defensive line, it's hard to evaluate defensive linemen without knowing what their responsibilities are. So a little bit earlier, we were talking about kill and spill technique, which could get into um, weird live streaming because you're getting into football diction and innuendo and all this crazy stuff. But one thing was certain: the LSU pass rush was better versus teams that had stationary quarterbacks. In other words, teams that did not have mobility at the quarterback position. So, a good example of this is Ali Gay. Ali Gay's two best games from this past year: Mississippi State and South Carolina. What did both of those teams have in common? A pocket quarterback who couldn't move. Ali Gay was also very effective versus Florida. Once again, a quarterback who couldn't move. One thing that really hurt LSU was even when they defended plays well on third down, quarterbacks that had decent mobility would take advantage with their legs. A good example of this was Bo Nix. Bo Nix killed us with his legs. Matt Corral, who is not mobile, but he's a decent athlete, had 150 yards rushing against us. 150 yards rushing. So, one thing Andre Carter is going to see on film is that pass rush lane responsibility is going to be very freaking important. Ali Gay did have a really good game against Ole Miss, though. Yeah, and he was really good in that game, but he was virtually unblockable against quarterbacks who couldn't move at all. And that was obviously KJ Costello of Mississippi State and Colin Hill of South Carolina. Those were his two clear-cut best games. Now, he was effective against Ole Miss. You are right about that. And Matt Corral is also a rather stationary quarterback. What's going to be interesting next year is in the SEC, will Auburn trot out Bo Nix yet again, who was awful as a sophomore? Will Alabama for sure go to Bryce Young, who is obviously very mobile? So that's going to be interesting. Let's see. What did Kane say? Kane always dropping bombs. Kane says, coaches in here, is it easier to keep your guards exposed athletically as opposed to tackles? Absolutely. So to answer Kane's question and to follow up on Carr, he answers it pretty well here. Yeah, offensive tackle is way more difficult than offensive guard, especially in pass pro. You could argue in the older days that it was harder to play guard than tackle. But now it's way harder to play tackle. That's why those guys get paid way more in the NFL. And I do believe, and Carvis has talked about this some, moving. And for those that don't know, Carvis is one of our commenters. Moving Austin Deculus into guard, and then putting Dummerville at right tackle or Cam Wire at right tackle. The problem you can run into, though, is if Max Johnson is the quarterback, well, he's left-handed. So are you going to put a first-year player as the defender of the blind side of Max Johnson? We'll see. Joe Burrow's in the chat. Joe, why would you ask me for my opinion? Joe, you are the all-knowing being of LSU football. Of course, we always have a chat. We always have a chance to beat Alabama. That's serious every year. LSU's got enough raw talent to beat Alabama. Now, this past year, we did not have the talent to beat Alabama. That is the one year I could really say that. But literally every year, LSU is going to have the raw talent to beat Alabama. You just got to have a lot of things go your way. The funny thing about the 2019 Bama game is LSU only had one lucky break. Alabama had so many lucky breaks in that game. LSU had only one fluky break, and that was on the first drive of the game where Tua just slipped the ball out of his hands, and we got a fumble recovery instead of Bama kicking a field goal. Outside of that, though, Alabama caught a lot of breaks throughout the course of the game. Now, some of that was Alabama making plays, but LSU made a lot of self-inflicted wounds to keep that game close. But literally every other year, Bama has caught the breaks against us. But yes, Joe, if LSU has decent scheme, even, like for instance, here's a good example of this. Go to the 2014 and 2015 teams. All right, let's just take that sample size of LSU players. 2014, 2015, 2016 LSU teams. So those teams with those rosters had Leonard Fournette's, Darius Geis's, Odell Beckham's, Jarvis Landry's, Jamal Adams, those types of players on the LSU roster, and Dante Jackson, guys that are still in the NFL. You mean to tell me that those guys weren't good enough to beat Alabama? We had a lot of talent throughout. It was the scheme. You can't just run Fournette right, Fournette left, and beat Alabama with Quinnen Williams and Daron Paynes and those guys. And we had good offensive linemen. We had Will Claps and Garrett Brumfields, guys that are still in the NFL. I mean, we had good offensive linemen, Ethan Posick. But your scheme has to be on point. And our scheme was so prehistoric. But even in those years, we had a chance to beat Alabama. It's just our scheme really hurt our chances to win those games. So, yes, every year, LSU is one of the few schools that have the raw talent to beat Alabama. The only year really was last year where the team was bare and Alabama returned most, or I would say half of their elite guys from the 2019 team, where it was the opposite for LSU. So, yes, Bama has beaten us 9 out of the last however many times, 10 or whatever. We've only beaten them once, but their scheme was far more advanced and their coaching was far more advanced than us. And honestly, it wasn't like Alabama was reinventing the wheel or anything. It was that we were just so stuck in the past in those middle years. So, one thing we tend to do is we think of the 2019 team, and they were so much better than all our other teams. But, those Fournette teams were good. They were really good. I mean, we won a lot of games. So, of course, we don't want to think of the Outback Bowl era. But because we were so prehistoric with our scheme, we had no chance to take that next step and start winning and getting back to New Year's Six bowls. Brandon, that's right. So this is a big year next year for James Craig. It's a put up or shut up year for him. This group has just got to be better. It's got to be better. And honestly, some of that has to do with Jake Peetz. If Jake Peetz can at least pick up the tempo, that's going to help out LSU's offensive line. Look, let's take a look at the overall recruiting ranking of last year's offensive line. Well, Dare Rosenthal was a 3-ish, 4-ish star defensive tackle. Left guard, Ed Ingram was 4-star left guard, but not like, I don't remember. Was Ed Ingram like a top player? Liam Shanahan is a transfer from Harvard. And then at right guard, you had Jason Hines, who was a 3-ish, 4-ish star defensive tackle. And then Austin Deculus, I believe, was the only like legit blue chip starter. So what that means is, obviously your star ranking doesn't determine how dominant of a player you are. I've heard that argument 1,000 times. But it also means more than likely that offensive line is not a line that can just mow people down. So it's interesting. I think if Jake Peetz can bring back some of those 2019 wrinkles and we can get the football out quicker and we play at a fast. Johnny, interesting. Let's go. Can you give us a player that's not talked about that can be a breakout and make a name for themselves? Eric Taylor name. Eric Taylor is interesting. First thing about Eric Taylor is it's going to be hard for him to see the field. For those that don't know, Eric Taylor is a 4-star defensive tackle from the 2020 class. And that was obviously a defensive tackle class for LSU. They got Jaquelin Roy, and then they also got Jacobian Guillory in that class. And LSU returned their starting defensive tackles from the year before, Neil Farrell and Glenn Logan, who had very mixed results in 2020. Now, I shared that I do think the starters next year will be Jaquelin Roy, Jacobian Guillory. I do think they are better fits for the 4-3 defense, where Glenn Logan and Neil Farrell had really good years in 2019 as backup/starters in the 3-4 defense. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be good 4-3 players. Neil Farrell made a last-second decision to play last season. But both of them weren't there quite yet developmentally to change into a 3-4-4-3 change. So, before we get into Eric Taylor, I hear this all the time. There's no difference between a 3-4 and a 4-3. Well, there is, especially for those two players, because in the 3-4, their jobs, they were legit defensive ends. They lined up over the offensive tackles, but they're not defensive ends in the same way that B.J. Ojulari and Ali Gay are, where they play a 5 technique or a 6 technique, depends on how you do there's different defensive line terminology, where they play the outside edge of the offensive tackle. So it was a huge shift for Glenn Logan and Neil Farrell, because instead of engaging with the offensive tackle on the edge every play, their role shifted to where they were engaging with guards and centers on every play. And that obviously changes your approach. So, in the case of Eric Taylor, he's going to have to kill it so hard in practice that he unseats all 4 of those guys, or at least unseats a few of them. Now, could he do it? He very well could do it. That's the thing. We haven't really even seen him play defensive tackle yet. But we'll see. And then you have this Mason Smith guy. And I hate to be that guy. I hate to be the 5-star sucker. I hate to be I know this is supposed to be a deep LSU discussion channel, and I get a lot of these questions. Who's the sleeper? Who's the next great thing? And obviously we fall in love with the 3-star story. We fall in love with the 2-star story with, Justin Jefferson and all of that. But sometimes, the 5-star guys are 5-star guys for a reason. And Mason Smith is one of those guys. I do think he's special. I really do. And obviously a lot of it is, the off the field work ethic. We've seen the videos. Julie Baldwin's done a great job at Rivals, breaking all of that down, interviewing Mason. If he truly wants to be great, then he's going to be an all SEC player in year 2. But obviously that comes down to want to, and it looks like he has that. Now, here's the thing about Mason Smith. What's up, Bruce? About time we saw you. So here's the interesting aspect about Mason Smith is that when you actually go watch his high school tape, well, he actually played the defensive end in a 3-4 defense at Terrebonne High School in Houma. So he would line up over the offensive tackle and play the same role that Guillory and Roy would play. Or not Guillory and Roy, Farrell and Logan played in 2019. But the difference is that he didn't play that position like they played the position. He was explosive. He made plays in the backfield. He's got this ridiculous motor. So, if everything works out and he doesn't have any injuries, he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy. And it might not be until year 2, but he's special. And I would be really shocked. I mean, I would put my stern film study reputation on the line. I would be floored if he doesn't turn out to be special. I really would. And, the hype is there. I mean, he is as heavily hyped a defensive lineman LSU has seen in a long time, to the point where Rivals listed him as the number 1 player nationally. Now, I don't know about that. There are some other guys I like better than him, but, I do think he's a real deal. I really do. And, it just depends.
Okay.
Where does Andre Carter see him playing?
Everybody has their power back on. Just FYI, we could be next.
We could be next, guys, without the power.
And Papa's got the burgers ready and everything.
Burgers are ready.
And fries.
Burgers and fries tonight.
They don't know about Papa's cooking. And Booger's eating her food right now.
And Bug's already eating her food? She didn't wait for me?
I was hungry.
Why would she wait for me? She's mad because you guys voted for Tartar over Bugger.
Tartar is not it. I just was like,
guys, it's burger and fries night and it's ready.
What do you want? You want just mayo?
Yeah, I want mayo, cheese.
Papa already melted the cheese on there.
Oh, he already melted the cheese on the patty. Can you make me another patch?
You want punch?
One patch? Saucy says Papa's cooking is always. Papa's cooking is the best. Her daddy cooks the best freaking food.
We call him Papa because
call him Papa. What's up, DC?
And did you say he gave you that new hoodie?
Yeah. I said, yeah, they gave me this hoodie. I've never had a purple LSU hoodie. Look at that. It's cool. All right, guys, the burgers and fries are hot. So I'm gonna let you know this. My girlfriend's a great cook, okay? But it's rare that I get to eat her dad's cooking. And I don't like going into other people's houses during the pandemic, but obviously it's cold. So, look, we're going to go for about 5 or 10 more minutes. Why not? Philip Webb is a wild card defensive end. Look, this was something that LSU did a good job of last year. They did a good job getting their race car packages on the field as often as they possibly could. So, in theory, what a race car package is when you put four defensive ends on the field to rush the passer. Um, so here's what's interesting is LSU's got a lot of potential here in these race car packages. Um, so what LSU would do is they would put Ali Gay at defensive tackle as a pass rusher and bring in obviously BJ Ojolari at one end, and then they would just cause havoc. And they did a good job out of that package. Now, what's interesting is Philip Webb never really got the opportunity to prove himself as a pass rusher. Now, he's listed as a linebacker, and a big reason he came to LSU was to be an edge rusher. He is legit a 3-4 outside linebacker type. I do think Philip Webb is not playing in the right scheme for his talents. That doesn't mean he can't be an effective player in a 4-3. But for instance, Marquivas Mingo was an effective player in a 4-3 as a defensive end. Punch right there. I'm about to come eat.
You want me to go ahead and get your burger ready?
You can if you want. So Philip, so just because you're playing out of scheme doesn't mean you can't be an effective defensive end. But that is Philip Webb's role. Now, what's interesting is of the defensive ends that LSU had committed, I thought Keanu Colt was the best. He ends up flipping to Bama. Good for him. I hope he turns out great, except against LSU. In fact, I hope he doesn't turn out great because, Bama doesn't need any more help. Whatever. However, my second favorite edge rush player in this class after Colt was Xavier Carter, Xavier Carter. He's already committed. And Xavier Carter is a fluid athlete, very fluid athlete. Unbelievable speed. He looks like a defensive back on the field. And what's interesting about Xavier Carter is that he played in 7-on-7s. And, well, why is that interesting? Well, 7-on-7s aren't meant for defensive ends. They're meant for outside linebackers. So because of that, Xavier Carter was listed as an outside linebacker, but LSU recruited him as a defensive end. So I think out of the rushers we don't talk about, I think Xavier Carter could be the best. I think he is the best. Now we have Landon Jackson. I think Landon Jackson has a lot of potential. One thing about his game is he is a little stiff. And what I mean by that is, he was so much more athletic than every offensive lineman he faced. It didn't really matter who was in front of him. So something he's going to have to work on when he gets to college is the same thing a lot of defensive linemen have to work on, firing off low. I think Landon Jackson could be a modern day 3-tech defensive tackle. I could see him pushing inside and putting on some weight. I do. So we'll see. We'll see. Carter has to play outside linebacker. He is light. He is very light. So that's going to be interesting. We'll see. I think Xavier Carter's really good. Let's see. Then you have Bryce Langston, who's interesting. I view Bryce Langston as a defensive tackle, but in high school, he played legit a 3-4 outside linebacker, a standing defensive end. It was very interesting how they used him in high school. How many TDs did Sting get this year? Any defensive touchdown is a miracle. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Sting. Look, if Derek Stingley Jr. is healthy, his South Carolina game was so remarkable, ridiculously remarkable. His Texas A&M game was remarkable. You know, those 2 games showed you how freaking great that dude is at tackle football. Um, but if he's not fully healthy, he's not the same player as with any other player. So if he's fully healthy, he'll be an All-American again next year. They said he's going to play on offense. I don't know if that's still going to be in the cards. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Obviously, his dad does weekly radio, so that would be interesting if they asked him that. Oh, for Slidell and Covington? Oh, man, that's interesting. Well, all right, guys, let's see. Any more questions or super chats here tonight? Chris, we already talked about Cardell. It's going to be interesting. I mean, look, a lot of this is going to come down to if James Craig wants to switch things up on the offensive line. And maybe Cardell gets in on that. I don't know. I just don't know. Oh, Josh, you missed Boog. Boog came a little bit earlier. And with Tartar. 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 Yeah, Brandon, we haven't even got to Savion Jones. And I mean, LSU's just got so many defensive ends. I just don't know. I just don't know how it's going to be divvied up, the snaps. Paris says safety play. I listed Derek Davis Jr. as a starter, day 1 starter. I don't like starting true freshman, but I do think he wins the starting job. I do. I think it's him and Todd Harris at the 2 safeties. So we'll roll with those 2 guys. Obviously, Mo Hampton and Jordan Tolles are the other 2 safeties. And then you have the Sage Ryan guy coming into the lineup and into the fold. Maybe Sage beats out all of them for a starting role. Also, and this is critical as well, LSU does return Cam Lewis. Now, Cam Lewis played some last year. It wasn't pretty, but he does come back for another year. He is a reliable special teamer. Maybe he gets some playing time. I don't know. I see it tough for him to crack this lineup. Maybe Jay Ward plays some at safety, and then Dwight McGlothern moves to the 3rd corner position. There's so many different possibilities. What about Ray Darius Jones? That was a guy who I forgot to mention in our defensive depth chart piece. Yeah, Brandon, I used to be of the ilk that I don't like rotating safeties, but I've changed my mind on that simply because safeties have to run so much during the course of a game. I don't mind 2nd and 3rd quarter snaps going to safeties if they are ready to play right now. Bruce has been running the Savion Jones fan club. I hope you're right. I mean, he's obviously very energetic. He's a guy that's very easy to root for. Jordan Tolles at linebacker. I wouldn't mind that. On 3rd and long, I would not mind that. And LSU goes back to the Mustang package. That would be interesting. Oh, Ahmad, you were watching our live stream from the Pelicans game? Did the Pels win tonight? I don't have my phone. My girlfriend put my phone on the charger over there. I didn't get to watch the Pels because I was getting ready for this live stream. Josh, Boogs already went to bed, man. Boogs had a rough go, guys. The snow is not good for Boogs. She can't go outside. You got to understand, Bug likes to go outside and get her normal walk in, and she just can't get her normal walk in. Oh, they're up by 12? Good. Let's go Pels. As you guys know, I'm a big Pels fan. I don't get to watch as much since putting together this channel has taken up so much time. I will say this. So I've been at my girlfriend's parents' house because of the power outage and all of that. And what's interesting about it is that, yeah, Bruce, that's interesting. So I put together that defensive depth chart video, and I'm in this private room. It's like an extra bedroom they have here. They have a nice house. And I was back here, and they were so fascinated that how much time they were talking about this, how much time goes into making each YouTube video I do. Because yesterday when I was putting together the defensive depth chart video, I was back here looking at tape and looking at old games and editing the video, and that video took 7 or 8 hours to produce, because as you guys know, I take my evaluations very seriously, and they simply thought it was just, and a lot of people just think that, and for some people on YouTube, it is just, they just put a camera on and they just upload a video. Well, mine's is like, more often than not, it's going to be edited down and all of that. And they were just so shocked at how much time it took, because this is kind of a weird job. Kari, look, I had to do it. And I didn't give you proper accreditation there, Kari. That is on me, KT. I'm so sorry about that. So KT was the one that told me I left out Ray Darius Jones. And something important. Bruce, I appreciate that. When I leave out something important, and look, is Ray Darius Jones an important piece for the LSU defense next year? Probably not. But I wanted to include everybody in that defensive depth chart piece. That's why I included John Trey Kirkland there at the end. Because I still think John Trey could play defensive back. So Kari sent that message, and he commented and said, "What about Ray Darius Jones?" I was like, "Oh my God." I cut out the Ray Darius Jones section. And the funny thing is I did have a little section where Ray Darius Jones was in the wild card section. So I am so sorry, Kari. I did not properly accredit you on tonight's live stream with the Ray Darius Jones shout out. I love it. I love it that you guys know Darius Jones. I want people that are diehard LSU football fans. Because look, I don't know everything. There's sometimes you guys comment on something that, someone included a comment earlier. Oh, the defensive back from West Virginia is once an LSU commit that's in the transfer portal. I don't remember who said that earlier. I'd have to go back and scroll. Let me see. I can't see it because it's from way earlier in the chat. Whitney, what's up? I didn't shout you out earlier. But I want this to be a Ray Darius Jones channel. Roger says, was the running game more hindered in 2020 from the running backs themselves or the scheme? So the easy answer is the scheme, right? But it is a little bit more complex than just the scheme. Some of it's, LSU will whiff on blocks, but sometimes, they would just get whipped. Roger, I don't know if you saw it, but I did an hour-and-a-half long film study breaking down every offensive snap from the Texas A&M game. And man, that was the one game where I could say the offensive line was so bad. They were bad, bad, so bad, to the point where LSU needed to start benching guys, and they simply didn't do it. And that's not really scheme. That is just guys getting whipped. That's personnel. So, I think it's a mix of that. And I think what can happen is if you, and Roger, I'm not criticizing you here, but if you just say, okay, was it the players or the scheme? Was it the players or the scheme? Well, the truth is that it's a mixture of everything. It's the running backs themselves, the offensive line themselves. Some of it is the quarterback. Because if you go from the Texas A&M film study and then you watch the Florida film study, you could see the difference at Max. I mixed up the Bama quarterback and the LSU quarterback. Max Johnson, the zone read game just becomes so much more effective because he holds the defensive end with his running ability, and it opens up that backside B gap, and LSU attacked that really well. Tony says, "Is this a soccer live stream?" You know what, Tony? I wish it was, because I am a huge Liverpool fan, and the boys got the big Champions League win 2-0 over, what was it? RC, or was it RB Leopards? I can't say that team name. Liverpool won today. Also, Kylian Mbappe put on a performance of the ages. That counterattack goal. What? Kylian Mbappe. I'm a huge Mbappe fan. Not afraid to admit it. But my Liverpool Reds won 2-0 today. Dave, that was interesting. What was that like? Tony, if you super chat, I'll talk EPL. I will talk. My views just went up. Mythic, what's up, babe? If you want to talk EPL, I will talk EPL, baby. Tony just comes in. Is this a soccer live stream? Out of nowhere. I'm also into soccer cards. Let's go, Pels. Are the Pels on national TV tonight, or is it just local? Let me see. Let's go, Pels. Oh, they are on national. Oh, they're playing Ja tonight. Let's go. Let's go. And the Arkansas Razorbacks, I'm an Arkansas basketball fan. Did they win tonight? I haven't seen. They were playing at the same time. My girlfriend's parents are big Arkansas basketball fans. Did Arkansas win tonight? They did. Okay, Hogs. They not only won, but they covered. I like that. XV3, what it do? Or XV3, that would be 38, right? 10, 5, 3. 38. Or is that what you're going for? Or is your name XVIII? Or is your name 38? And if your name is 38, why is your name 38? I'm a jersey number snob. And the one thing about the number 38 is that there's not many great athletes who wore the number 38. There's just not. Oh, that's 18? Oh, that is 18. It would be triple X. God, my Roman numeral name is way off. God. My bad. Mythic, yes, I think Mike Jones is a real deal. I really do. All right, we're going to wrap this up. And I said that a minute ago, but I was just thrown off by the soccer live stream. Tony, are you still here? Tony Flores? Let's see. I think they can, Brandon. I do. It just depends if they win the job. I know, Jawan, them burgers are getting cold, but I will sacrifice a cold burger for you. Dave, send me a link. And you could just do it on the comment section of the LSU USC game. Paris, good question. 2022 recruiting class. Here's something that could make you feel better about the 2022 recruiting class because it already is good. There were two guys I think LSU really needed to get, and that's Walker Howard and um, Will Campbell. Whatever else you get is gravy. I mean, they're going to get a top 5, top 10 class. I think that's going to help out. Carlton, good question. So this is a generic LSU hoodie. I don't even know what company it's from. In fact, the tag is still on it. My girlfriend's parents actually gave this to me. Bug, Jones, and White at linebacker. Josh White. I like that, Bruce. I like that. But yeah, I'm going to go Berg. So, you guys, we do have cheeseburgers on the grill. They're probably a little chilly now. But thank you guys for tuning into the live stream. I'm sorry about the audio issues in our first live stream. And obviously, the best way you can support the channel is sending super chats on here. You can also hit my Venmo and Snapchat, Venmo and Cash App at Carter the Power. All right, guys. You guys got a treat tonight. You not only got Book, you also got to see Tartar. That is special. Okay? Everyone stay safe. I'm going to go watch these Pels beat down on the Grizz. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! Mo Hampton's probably a Grizzlies fan, though. So, Mo, if you're watching, I'm sorry. But still. What? I in the live stream, and someone just says Brian Thomas Jr. is not good. Chris, why would you troll me with something that is clearly not true? Let's go.